Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was the one in charge of the loading ramp that morning, the steel tongue that turns a floating building into a street. It's not glamorous work. It's lining up lane markers with paint that's seen too much salt, counting axles and gross weights by feel, and reading faces as much as bumpers, trying to judge who is going to stop where you point and who is going to roll 4 feet too far because fear makes the foot heavy. But on day 5, when the city's sirens merged into a kind of weather, the ramp felt like the last piece of solid ground in Seattle. People stared past me at the open mouth of the ferry like it was a lifeboat. Maybe it was. We were at Colman Dock, Pier 52. The schedule board was meaningless now. We were running anything that could turn and carry. A state patrol cruiser had taken position at the head of Lane 1, its hood splattered with ash from somewhere. Not from us, I hoped. And a trooper in a reflective rain shell gave me the nod just as the deck intercom crackled. Deck, bridge, prepare for final vehicles. We're tight on draft. The captain's voice, calm as a ruler's edge. I thumbed the handset. Copy bridge, ramp 2 more, no more. But when I lifted my eyes, the trooper was already waving 3 through. 2, I said, holding my palm out to the third. A dusty minivan whose driver's hands were white on the wheel. He rolled anyway, bumper kissing the ferry's rubber. My crew partner, Gina, slapped the fender and shot me that look we keep for these moments. We can say rules all day. Physics makes the final call. The ferry groaned. The hydraulic system hissed as I feathered the ramp clear and watched the last glistening line of Seattle slide under us. When the pins locked and the horn sounded, people clapped like that horn could pull their fear across the bay and leave it behind on the pier. I wore my orange vest, a battered radio clipped at my shoulder, and the name patch Evan stitched over a shirt that smelled like fuel and rain even after the wash. Officially, I'm an AB, able seaman, deck department, which in peace means lines, chocks, and paint. And in a week like this means whatever someone shouts first. Leaving the dock, we could see the hills behind downtown braided with red and white lights. A column of smoke wandered up the Duwamish like a new skyline. The captain didn't say the word quarantine, but when I glanced up toward the passenger deck windows, half the signs that used to point to espresso and restrooms now said shelter in place, in thick marker over printed sandwich board menus. The terminal's PA had put out guidance that morning. Stay in your vehicles if possible. Masks if you've got them. Do not interact with anyone exhibiting fever, confusion, or sudden agitation. The city had spun out leaflets overnight and we'd taped them along the stair towers. Someone had added in ballpoint, pray if that's your thing. We loaded light on officers and heavy on strangers. People had brought kitchen drawers full of passports and keys, a parrot in a laundry basket, a rolled carpet lashed to an SUV roof. We had far more than the usual complement of kids, who watched me with a curiosity that felt like a small mercy. In lane 4, a man in a tool belt stood outside his pickup, counting everyone in his truck bed without moving his lips. A silent chant. I walked the center line as the klaxon sounded one prolonged blast to signal departure, then too short to port as we backed. My boots clanged, and the steel deck answered back like a drum. Once we were clear and the skyline settled into its familiar movie distance, I set chocks at the front of lane 1, bending and placing wood blocks carved by 50 winters of use. In normal weather, it's a ritual. The angles matter. Today, every stop was tight. The ferry had that low-slung feeling, the one the old-timers call a wet shoe. Heavy and eager to show you the freeboard when you look out a side door. Not an emergency, not yet, just a reminder that you can only cheat numbers so far. The mate came down the starboard casing stairs in her hard hat, her own vest scuffed gray from foam drills. "Evan," she said, "the bridge wants to know if we can make a lane forward for responders as a contingency, just in case we need to move someone up front fast." She didn't say the word medical. She didn't say the other word either. "Lane 2, I said, because it was the straightest run to the bow, and because right now it was the one lane I could still reorganize without a mutiny. "We'll shift a couple compacts into the squeeze next to lane 6. She nodded. "Keep it low-key." The mate's name was Laura Ngu. She could bring the ship into Bainbridge blindfolded on a gale and make it look like ballet. On day 2, I'd seen her carry a 4-year-old down the stairs while talking a grandfather through a panic attack, the way some people talk to cats. We did what crews do when they need space where there isn't any. Gina and I spoke in hand signals and a kind of polite pressure, guiding mirrors past mirrors, bumpers inside breath. We tucked a green Civic into a spot that probably only existed because the deck had a slight camber. The driver, a nurse by her scrub top, son asleep in a child seat, gave us a tearful thumbs up. The responders' lane was never going to be textbook wide, but it would fit a stretcher angled just right. Sometimes that's what good looks like at sea, an angle that wouldn't get a medal but would save a life. Halfway across the bay, I did what I always do. I looked up. I like to see the land I'm leaving and the land I'm going to measure my boat against the geography like a fingertip on a map. Downtown was a stack of blue glass, soft-edged by a mist that hadn't decided if it wanted to be rain. Alki Beach, off our port bow, slid by like a memory. Out in the middle of this wide gray room between the city and the island, the surface goes from the comic book ripples near the shore to that deep, patient heave. The wheel wash spread white behind us. A gull tracked it the whole way, as if we were drawing a chalk line in the water to show where we'd been. The first sign we had a problem didn't look like a problem. It looked like a tiny cloud drifting inside the car deck. I saw it as a shimmer at the edge of lane 5. We've all trained to read the faint things, the way a face looks when someone's about to faint, the particular caw of the fire alarm when it's testing versus when it's real. But this was almost nothing. A soft smear in the air above an old Jeep's hood, the kind of thing that could just be breath-in cold, except it wasn't cold. I kept walking. The second thing wasn't a thing either. It was a sound. A clicking that didn't belong to any engine or latch. Something like a fingernail on metal. I shifted my walk more towards the center line and caught Gina's eye across the lanes. She'd stopped with one hand resting on a minivan door, head tilted. The third thing was unmistakable. The sweet, heavy smell that comes when insulation starts to cook before anything else does. I was 2 steps from the red pull station when the detector found it for me. Bravo, the euphonic voice of the car deck alarm, then the tone. I keyed my radio. Deck to bridge, smoke at lane 5 midships, initiating response. Not yet visible flame. I already had a line in my hands. The hydrant caps come off easily even in panic if your hands know the threads. Gina pulled foam concentrate from the compartment and snapped it onto the inline adductor like we said we'd never need to outside of drills. A jet of seawater and concentrate met and turned into something that made the air smell like a mechanic's shop and a hospital simultaneously. I flicked the nozzle to a wide pattern. The white blanket carried across the Jeep's hood and hugged the shape like a memory. And then the real problem started. The one that lives inside people. A door popped 3 cars back and a man stepped out. The clicking sound amplified because now I saw its source. His teeth tapping. He stood too straight and too still in a way that never looks right. And the woman in the passenger seat, his partner, I guessed, put her hand on the window glass but didn't open it. "Sir, please stay in your vehicle," I said. holding the line steady on foam. "We've got a small engine fire. We'll be under control in 30 seconds. He didn't look at me. His eyes were over my shoulder, the way I've seen people look at a fishing bobber, as if waiting for it to dip. He stepped forward, steady, like sleepwalking. I didn't think about day one or the news. I thought about distance and about how much space I had between this man and the nurse's Civic. Space is more valuable than anything on a car deck. "Gina," I said, and she was already moving, ready with the pike pole we use for moving chocks without bending. She set it horizontal and gentle across the man's chest. No strike, just a bar of wood and metal and suggestion. It's amazing how often a simple barrier tells the body what to do, even when the mind won't listen. He stopped, eyes unfocused. The partner mouthed, "Thank you," and put her hand on the window again, pressing hard enough that I could see the shape of her fingers in the fog. "Deck to bridge," I said. "We have one passenger out of vehicle exhibiting altered behavior. He is contained. Car fire is light. Positive control with foam. Requesting standby for responders lane." "Bridge copies," Laura said. Calm, always. "Evan, hold position there. We're notifying sector and Bainbridge terminal. Keep doors secured. We're not opening stair towers until we have a plan." The car's hood trembled as the foam found heat and did its chemistry. White turned tan. Hiss gave way to silence. The Jeep's owner, 2 cars back, started to step out, and I raised my palm like a traffic cop. "Stay seated, we'll ventilate in a minute." He nodded and put both hands on the steering wheel as if that made him responsible. Behind me, the tapping man breathed. A slow, regular out-breath, and then the same in. I could smell sweat sharp in the fog. He turned his head towards Gina's pike pole like a plant to light, and she eased the tip into the notch where hood meets fender, pinning him without force. "We use leverage and distance. We don't use hands if we can help it. The training videos don't cover this, but the physics doesn't change." Sector Puget Sound to any ferry in Elliott Bay, came the VHF through someone's open window. A mariner's habit. You keep channel 16 low volume so your world stays lined to other worlds. "We are monitoring developing situations at piers. Report any hazardous conditions." Our wheelhouse would answer. The deck is a different language. Mine is close range, shouted names. And then a different sound tugged my head. Screaming tires, the kind where someone hits reverse instead of park. The minivan that had forced itself aboard at the last second bucked, hopped back 6 inches, and bumped the bumper behind it. The driver's eyes were enormous, her hands pawing the air for the gear shift like she'd never seen it before. Her son woke to a startled cry, and then the thin wail of a child who can't parse what's gone wrong. "Evan," Gina said, as gentle as a stage whisper, "we're losing the garden." The garden is what some old-timers call a deck when people start moving where they shouldn't. It's a joke about the rows of vehicles and the way panic weeds its way out through any gap and takes the lane with it. Fixing it isn't shouting loud. It's giving the panic a different job. I dolly-hopped over chocks and put myself square in the minivan driver's view, hands palms out, the universal sign for "you can press your heart against my hands without touching me." "Foot off," I said, calm. "Neutral, there you go, just breathe with me. In 2, out 2. I breathed. She mirrored, shoulders dropping a fraction. The child's cry softened. "You're going to be okay," I said. The words that wouldn't pass the lawyer test, but passed the human one. We've had hundreds of small car deck fires over the years. We train. We're trained for panic, too. Was that true? True enough. The tapping man looked at me then, as if those words were meant for him. In his pupils I saw something slippery, an echo of every clip we'd been told not to watch. He wasn't lurching. He wasn't a movie, he was a man whose body had stopped taking suggestions. When he moved again, it was toward the foam, the way a distracted person drifts toward a bright sign. Gina's pull kept him steady, and I fell back to it, nudging him by the shoulders with the pole's shaft until he faced his own car again. "Sir," I said, to fill the air with anything. The word didn't reach him. Maybe it reached his partner, who closed her eyes as if praying changes physics. The mate arrived with 2 more deckhands and a first aid bag. No one brought the handcuffs we'd never needed before, the ones meant for a different kind of unruly. We had something better. Long nylon straps from the cargo control locker, the ones we used to tame an overconfident motorcycle. We never touched the man above the elbows. We let the straps do the persuading, wrapping them around the car pillar in his forearms, snugging without pain. He seemed as content standing like that as he did moving. The partner cracked her window an inch. "He was fine at breakfast," she said, more to herself than to us. The foam did its job. The detector's light reset with a click you only hear when you're directly under it. We cracked the side doors to ventilate, just a sliver, letting the bay draft pull the sweet chemical smell into the morning. If I could have bottled that relief and given it to everyone, I would have. We were 5 minutes from the island when the second alarm tripped. This one wasn't mine. It came from the bow overhead, the faint, shattering tinkle that means something above your head has failed. I looked up through the car deck skylight, the one that feeds the passenger deck with gray Puget Sound light, and saw a smear of orange that wasn't ours. Just the suggestion of it. The overhead on the car deck hummed as the deluge lines pressurized, and I glanced toward the valve panel out of habit. We run water carefully on a car deck. There's a reason every drill repeats the words free surface effect. If you turn a car deck into a shallow pool, you turn the ship into a toddler with a full mug, top-heavy and ready to spill. We aim the water at mouths, not at the floor. We make sure drains run. We make sure it doesn't become a lake. The mate was already moving for the stair tower. "Passenger deck," she said. "Gina, with me. Evan, you have the bow. Keep that responders lane open." She didn't add, "and keep everyone from making that lane their own." I ran the responders lane, not with speed, but with the careful shoulder that says I belong and therefore you do too. It's astonishing how far tone carries on a car deck. Even now, with fear like a second due on everything, a human voice saying, "Please hold," can quiet a whole row. I reached the bow vehicle door and checked the hydraulic control cabinet. The gauges were good. We had pressure. We had options. A state trooper in a high-vis vest stepped from behind a truck cab at the lane's last bend. I hadn't seen him board. He gave me a nod that said he'd been watching and I hadn't made his day any harder. He held his hands low, fingers open, the way we're taught to be seen. "Trooper Harris," he said. I rode on with the last ambulance. They're stuck back near the stern. I've got a medical kit with me. "Evan," I said, tapping the patch over my heart. "I've got fire. I've got lines. I do not have medicine beyond Band-Aids." "We may need to make decisions," he said. He didn't stare toward the passenger deck smoke the way some people would. He looked at the floor like it could tell him forces. Cop eyes, but softer. I liked him immediately. From the stair tower, the mate's voice came tinny on the general PA, calm and amplified. "Attention on board. This is the mate. Please remain in your vehicles. We have a small incident on the passenger deck. We are directing air to improve ventilation. Please keep the lanes clear. We will advise." "We need to talk," I wanted to say to no one in particular, "about what we call a small incident." But words matter. Small meant don't panic. Panic meant people would open doors and make lanes vanish. And lanes were life. The captain called down on my shoulder radio, "Deck bridge?" "Go for deck," I said. "We're assessing options. Bainbridge is calling for immediate screening on arrival. Sector is advising possible quarantine at the dock. We have reports of altered behavior on passenger deck. We also have a minor fire in the vending area, now contained by crew." Her voice was precise. It meant the situation was complicated, but not yet strange. "Bridge deck," I said. "Bow is secured. Responder's lane is open. We can make a run straight up the middle to the bow doors if we need." There was a pause, the size of a plan forming. "Copy," she said. "Evan, with your familiarity with the bow door hydraulics, if we needed to beach, could you put the door onto gravel without losing the rams?" The word didn't feel like a shark anymore. Beach. We practice with charts. We talk about emergencies like they're stories we tell and then fold away. Beaching is one of those stories. Out here, there's Blake Island, low and green, like a pause between city and homestead. East shore is gravel. The tide was flooding. Last I checked by habit as we cast off. A flood tide makes a cushion. "Yes," I said, "because you tell your captain the truth or you get off her boat. We'd need to drop the port anchor and use the thrusters to hold her straight. We'd take it slow. We'd probably lose pins, not rams. I can set limiting stops." "Understood," the captain said. She didn't have to say that this ship was not a toy. There's a reason you learn her by walking her. "Stand by." Harris, the trooper, listened with one ear without making it obvious. "If you beach," he said softly, "you keep the ship from being a bridge to Bainbridge." "And keep what's on board from hitting the city," I said. He didn't nod. We didn't need to say the word. Choices had become geography. A new sound pressed across the deck then. A car horn held down without rhythm. Not a warning, not a call. Just the sort of wide, uncertain noise a terrified hand makes. I ran to it and found the nurse in the Civic, tears on her face, her hand on the horn like it was an idea she could send into the future. I tapped the glass lightly. She lifted her hand and the deck breathed again across 3 lanes. "You're okay," I said through the glass, and she nodded, and I realized I'd never said my name to her, but she knew I was supposed to be there. Above us, the stairwell door opened and the mate appeared. Smoke laced the top of the tower like a veil, thin and gray. Gina came out behind her with a red bag slung over her shoulder like a delivery. "We've got 3 upstairs showing symptoms," the mate said to me, not to the deck at large. "Non-compliant behavior. 1 tried to force the outside doors. We contained them in the fore-lounge." She swallowed. "Passengers are scared. We need to move air." "Fans on high," I said. "Side doors cracked," she nodded. "We're past half crossing," she said. "Bridge is talking about Blake. Sector wants our numbers. We had a flare-up at the coffee kiosk, now out." Gina set down the bag and opened it. Inside, plastic face shields, nitrile gloves, a set of long zip ties, duct tape, trauma shears. We are not a hospital, but we are something else. A team that learned to put our hands exactly where they matter and nowhere else. I keyed the mic. "Deck to bridge. I recommend Blake East Shore. We can ground on the gravel near the old camping pier. Flood tide, less pounding. We can rig the bow door as a ramp. My hydraulic panel is good." The captain didn't ask me why I thought this was the call. She'd already done that math. "Bridge copies," she said. "All hands, prepare for beaching at Blake Island. Trooper Harris, please report to the bow. Sector has been advised." The PA clicked on again, and this time it was the captain herself. "Attention on board. This is the captain. We are diverting to Blake Island to ensure your safety. Remain in your vehicles and await crew instruction. Keep lanes clear. We will guide an orderly disembarkation onto the beach. We will not approach a populated terminal until we have adequate support to screen and assist everyone on board." There was a beat of silence as if the ship itself inhaled. Then something unexpected happened. People listened. Fear likes to move, but it also likes a leader. We swung wide, the bow sliding toward the island, a green loaf of quiet waiting in water that had been its moat for millennia. The skyline shifted to our stern, the Space Needle rising like a lighthouse in a city that had suddenly stopped pretending to be separate from the sea. I moved to the hydraulic station at the bow door, the one set into the bulkhead behind a steel flap. The gauges showed good oil pressure. The manual override levers were greased, neat. I put one hand on the emergency shutoff in case a line blew and sprayed hot oil where my face would be, and I set the mechanical stops 2 inches higher than usual. If we grounded with the door low, we'd sacrifice the hinge pins. If we kept it too high, we'd make a cliff no old body could climb. In the best cases, the door would find gravel like a boot finds a shoelace, and we'd make a path. "Bridge bow," I said. "Hydraulics ready. Anchor windlass ready." "Copy," Laura said. "Stand by, port anchor. We'll drop in 30 seconds. Trooper Harris, please assist with crowd control at bow." Harris didn't ask how to do that. He took a position with his palms open, facing lane 2, and began to talk in sentences, made no promises, and offered no lies. "When the door drops," he said to the front row of windshields, "you will wait for the crew signal. You will exit on foot to the right, single file, hands visible. You will not run. You will not take pets off leashes. You will seat children on the ground at the head of the line and adults will ring them. You will listen. We have got you." From the after part of the deck, a muffled thump rolled forward, the kind of sound a tire makes when it gives up air. The air changed temperature a degree as if someone had opened an oven 2 rooms away. I hoped the foam ate that too. We didn't have room for 2 problems. "Stand by," the captain said, and then the anchor dropped. It's one of the best sounds at sea when you want it. The thunder of chain cascading through metal and air, the sudden grab as the pawl catches and the ship's head cants just so. The port anchor bit clean. Blake's east side is friendly graveled, not the snappy, snaggy rock farther around. The bow thrusters hummed, and the bay rose to meet us the way it's always risen to meet anything that dares set down in it. The first kiss of steel and stone sent a tremor up through the deck. I dropped the bow door in slow pulses, watching the oil temperature, feeling with my hands for any itch in the levers that would tell me a pin was going. We hit once, twice, and then the door's edge found purchase. It groaned the way a ship groans when you ask it to be both a ship and a bridge. The green trees held their breath. "Door down," I said. "Door is holding. We've got gravel contact, pins are intact." "Copy," the captain said. "All hands to evacuation stations. Deck, commence controlled disembark onto beach. Keep responders' lane secure. Keep stair towers closed until instructed." Gina slid in next to me with a bucket of chalk, squat and heavy. We used chalk because sometimes you need to number what you love. She handed me a short stub, and we marked tallies at the bulkhead as we waved each person by, an old ritual from lifeboat drills repurposed. "Lane 2, out on my signal," she shouted. Gentle shout, not angry. Harris gestured people into a line. The nurse and her son came first, the child's hand sticky against his mother's, eyes wide at the sight of the beach. As they passed me, the child looked at my name patch and said even, which was close enough. I nodded to him, as serious as you can be to someone holding a stuffed otter like it was a map. "Single file, touch the bulkhead," I said to each, the way I always do. "You learn who needs instructions and who needs blessing. You're doing great." I pointed them down the etched-out path to the sand. Our bosun, a man whose forearms told the story of a life of rope, had already set a line ashore with a small anchor to mark the way. The beach sheltered us with drift logs that looked like whales sleeping. behind me. The tapping man strained once against his straps and then went still again, breathing like a metronome set too slow. His partner leaned out her window the inch we'd allowed and whispered to me, "Please, Tiny." The hardest word. I leaned in and gave her the one thing I could. "You'll go next. We'll help him. We will." She nodded. "People want a story. It doesn't have to be long." We moved them. We moved them like we painted. Clean lines, no drips. The ones who wanted to run we slowed by asking them to touch the hatch on the way, like a high five that makes a person laugh at themselves. The older ones we gave an elbow to lean their dignity on. A man in a suit who'd lost both his shoes stepped onto the gravel and stopped to look down at his bare feet in the gray pebbles. I watched his face soften into the smallest smile, like the feel of the earth had translated something in his head. If I hadn't been so busy, I might have cried, and it wouldn't have been the wrong thing to do. We left cars. We left things that 2 days ago people would have thought were themselves. The tools guy who'd counted people in his truck bed left the truck without looking back. "I can buy wrenches," he said to no one. "I can't buy time." It's not the kind of line you expect to hear in a car deck, but people find poetry when their backs have a wall behind them made of water. We were maybe 30 souls out when the stair tower door banged open again. Laura came down with 2 passengers in front of her. 2 men, mid-40s, one with a brow soaked in sweat, and behind them 4 more we didn't want to mix with the line. The 4 moved in that sure-footed way again. Not fast, not dramatic, just inexorable. Laura directed the 2 sweating men toward me. To the 4, she held out her palm like a cop with an invisible badge. They split the space around her like water around a piling, and then stopped at her outstretched hand as if she'd extended a steel sheet. "Don't," she said. The word stretched like a rope under strain. They didn't parse it, but their bodies read its geometry. "Evan," she said without looking at me, "we need a containment corner. The bow gives you one if you're willing to be ugly about it." We slid a steel pallet of spare chocks to make a pen against the bulkhead in a truck's bumper, taped bright hazard tape across the gap like we were warning them about wet paint instead of their own nervous systems. The 4 stepped into the space like it had always been for them. One set his palms on the truck's hood and stared at the ship's emblem on the grill like it was a lake. They didn't speak. They breathed. I've been around people long enough to know that breath and motion fill whatever story you try not to tell. Harris angled toward them, slow. "We've got to keep them separate," he murmured, with a question at the end of the sentence. "We've got them separate," the mate said, quiet, flat. She and Harris exchanged looks like chess players who both know the board and are deciding which piece they can afford to lose. "I've notified Sector we've got 4 upstairs and 1 down," she said. "They're asking us to maintain containment. They're sending a cutter." "How long?" Harris asked. No judgment, just timing. "Longer than I want to count." She looked at me. "Keep moving the line." We kept moving the line. This is the model for survival, I think. A human line walking carefully between a truck and a scene that might be anything by tomorrow, listening to instructions, trusting strangers with vests. I gave my chalk another notch. The nurse turned to watch the others behind her, and our eyes met across the tides of people. She mouthed, "Thank you again." I shook my head. The ship had done most of it by being something familiar. We emptied lane 2. We started lane 3. We worked around the tapping man. His partner slid the car forward the 4 inches we needed without being asked. Lips pressed in a line so tight she could have cut paper with it. The tapping man breathed in, out. A teenager 3 cars back whispered to his father, "Is he?" And the father shook his head once, sharply, and said, "He's having a bad day," which was, I suppose, technically correct. From the stern, another sound rolled forward. A cough you could hear even in steel. The mate's eyes flicked back down the ship the way only officers can. Seeing through cars and bulkheads like the deck map in their heads overlays reality. "We've got to split the deck," she said to me, sotto voce. "We can't run all lanes past them. We'll cross-load to starboard at the mid-break and send 2 lines outside on the casing." I thought of the diagram we'd all learned the second week on the job, the one showing the car deck like a set of lungs. Fresh air in here, exhaust out there, fans like a diaphragm pushing and pulling. "We'll lose speed," I said. "We already lost speed," she said. "We traded it for control. Keep trading." People kept coming. Now we had to snake them along the outside walkway, the narrow shelf along the hull where people never walk except when we pressure wash rust. The bay slapped the hull 2 feet below their sneakers, and they kept their eyes on my palm like it was the only fixed point in a moving world. I regretted every time in training I'd rolled my eyes at the phrase, "speak with confidence." Confidence lives fine without me, but 100 people can lean on it at once if you let it. We took a break when the line thinned and counted our tick marks. 112, then 180, then 240. When I think back, I see chalk dust on my fingertips like pollen. We were making a new species out there, people who had walked off a ship that had carried them between hard choices and were now standing among driftwood not touching their phones because they knew there was nothing on the screen that had any more authority than the voice on the PA. "Sector to ferry," said the radio on Harris's shoulder. He'd clipped it on with a fisherman's efficiency. "Advise on status." Harris keyed up and didn't consult anyone on the words, because we were all by then the same voice. "We are beached on Blake Island East Shore," he said. "We are conducting controlled disembarkation. We have small contained fire and vehicle. We have 5 individuals exhibiting altered behavior contained separately. Request EMS and public health at staging. Request rescue boats for transfer. We are secure at present." "Copy," Sector said. "Hold in place. Cutter deploying. ETA 4 minutes. Recommend you do not open stair towers to passenger deck unless absolutely necessary. Maintain containment." We did. Sometimes the hard thing is a perfect match for the easy instruction. We did not open. We maintained. As the last of Lane 3 filtered to the beach, a change in air pressure tickled my ears. The tapping man had stopped. He tilted his head like a dog hearing a frequency we don't. The partner's grip on the wheel tightened. In mirrors, 100 faces were watching something without wanting to admit it. He breathed in. He breathed out. He leaned, first slightly, then with the weight of a new instruction, to the limit of the nylon strap that held his wrist and the car's pillar together. It creaked, and the sound told me that despite my careful strapping, the fiber wanted to trade its shape for another. "Hold," I said to the air, though the word was to no one. The partner closed her eyes. I stepped closer and put my hand, open-palmed again, between him and me like that could make a dam. He pressed his forearms quietly into the strap the way a tide presses a log into a dock. "Evan," Gina said, quiet urgency, and I turned to see what she meant. A new tremor in the responder's lane as the crowd, sensing something like a breaker lifting underfoot, shifted forward an inch. People can be ocean. Fear is gravity. You don't fight it, you redirect it. "Eyes on me," I said, in the voice I use for the crew when a line is about to take someone's fingers. "Look here, here. You," I said, to a man whose jaw was set like he'd been chewing stone. "Tell me your daughter's name." It's a trick. People love to say their children's names even in the worst minutes. He did. It came out like rain. "Good," I said. "Keep her in your mouth. Keep her safe that way while your feet follow Gina." And they did. The tapping man eased back. The strap held. The partner breathed a sound that could have been a prayer or simply the air leaving a pressure cooker. I let my shoulders drop half a notch. From behind me, A voice I didn't know. What about my dog? It was the parrot lady, actually. Other hand on a small leash attached to a small animal that shook like a metronome. The dog had done the math already. The beach, the noise, the air. We can't take dogs past the flagged line, I said, trying to be honest and gentle simultaneously. Hold on, folks, if you're not yet to the bow, put your windows down an inch so your pets have air. Everyone, if you've already gone, make room on the beach beyond the drift logs so animals have a quiet spot. The crowd on the sand, hearing me through the stair tower's external speakers, moved like a flock. We had created a second team without knowing it, the ones who'd already gotten out now helping the ones who hadn't. It's the simplest army. We got through lane 4. We started lane 5, the one with the heat-kissed Jeep. The owner, a retired teacher if my guess about the pencil behind his ear was right, patted the hood like you pat a horse you love and are leaving at a kindly neighbor's pasture. "You be good," he said to it. Then to me, "My wife is going to say I told you so quiet I won't hear it. I will hear it anyway." I nodded as if this were maritime procedure. The ship shifted then, a slow sigh. The flood tide lifted us a half inch and set us down again with the kindness of a hand laying a blanket out flat. The bow door groaned and held. The gray sky had opened without asking anyone's permission, and a fine rain made everyone's hair a little darker. The scent of cedar from the island drifted out and mingled with engine heat and the faint metallic tang of fear. This is what the world smells like when it's still itself, but tilted a degree. When the last of the lines we'd meant to empty were empty, we took a breath as a crew. The mate pulled me out of the current just long enough to put a hand on my shoulder. "You're doing good," she said, with the same tone she uses for ballasting. Praise is a fluid too. It moves where you pour it. I looked past her at our contained 5. They stood calm behind their tape, as if waiting for a ferry we were not. One hummed a thin tone I couldn't hear unless I really tried. Their eyes tracked nothing in particular. They had the patience of a tide gauge. The partner of the tapping man looked at me and then at the island's dirt path. "Please," she said again, the word threadbare now. "Can he?" "We will get him care," I said, because it wasn't wrong, and because I needed to say something that laid a plank in front of her foot. "Sector," came the radio, louder now. "Cutter is 5 out. We will approach your starboard side. Do not open doors on passenger deck. We will bring public health personnel and EMS ashore at your location. Maintain perimeter." When the gray silhouette of the Coast Guard cutter shouldered around the island's point, the people on the beach didn't cheer. They didn't clap. That's for end-of-movie moments. They shifted their weight and set their jaws as if a coach had said run one more lap. The cutter slowed. White water rucked around its bow as if someone had shaken out a bedspread. A small boat fanned off its side and bumped through the chop toward our beach like a water beetle. The first responder off wore a vest marked Public Health in block letters so big a drone could have read them. She stepped onto the wet gravel like she did it every day. Behind her came 2 in blue and 1 in green. The trooper moved to meet them, and there, between drift logs and the bow's steel, strangers swapped words that turned into plans. A portable loudhailer came out of a bag, and someone who looked like a nurse but carried herself like a soldier began to assign numbers to things that hadn't had numbers 5 minutes ago. We turned the ship into a clinic without saying the word. The contained 5 stayed contained. The tapping man's strap stayed a strap and not a story. The dog trembled and then took a small drink from a bowl I hadn't seen anyone bring. The parrot said a sentence that sounded a lot like "good boat." And people laughed the kind of laugh that holds something down so it doesn't break. Hours later, the kind of hours that compress whole days, the flood reversed. The ship's bow settled in the gravel with the way a sleeper rolls to find a new place in the pillow, We had thinned the crowd not to nothing but to a shape that felt like a waiting room instead of a mob. The ship's heart, which lives in her hull and not just in her machines, beat steadily. The Coast Guard team moved those who needed care onto the small boat in quiet lines. The public health officer set up a folding table under a tarp and started asking the questions that would, if anything still could, separate what was dangerous from what was only afraid. We never made it to the island with the stores and the friends and the houses. We never tied up at Winslow and blew the long blast that sends gulls up like confetti from the pilings. In the way that matters, we made it somewhere better. We did not become a bridge for fear to run across. We became a gate with people on both sides guarding it. As the light went from gray to the particular blue of dusk that Puget Sound keeps for its own, the captain came down from the bridge. She walked the bow with the look she wears when she's checking wind against lines, a simple, weather-borne calculation instead of the kind that involves newspapers. She stopped beside me at the hydraulic panel and looked at my chalk marks and then at the tape pen. "You did good work," she said, and I saw then that her eyes were as tired as my arms. "We may need to hold here through the turn," she added. "We'll cycle the crew in shifts. We will not move until we know where we are moving matters." "Copy," I said, out of habit. Sometimes the only language you have left is procedural, and that is enough. "Do you want to go up to the passenger deck?" she asked, a glint of humor finding its way through both of us. "It's very quiet. We put the pretzels in a bucket." I shook my head. "I'll stay with the door." The door was my job. It had brought them off. It would bring them back on later or somewhere else. A door doesn't have to swing to be a door. Sometimes it's enough to be open to the right place. The mate came by again and stood looking out at the island. "It's funny," she said. "We always call this a bridge-type vessel. Engines at both ends, pilot houses too. But today we got to be a ferry in the original sense, carrying. Carrying and choosing where to set down," I said. She nodded. "That part." After a while, the tapping man's partner spoke to me through her inch of window, voice frayed but steady. "We were going to see his mother," she said. "She lives near Rolling Bay. He was going to fix her porch light. He was so proud of how many batteries he'd found." I looked at the taut nylon straps and the smooth taut skin on the back of her hands where she gripped the wheel. "He will fix lights again," I said. It wasn't a promise. It was a prayer with a different uniform. Night touched the sound in the way it does here, not abrupt, but like a bruise deepening. The cutter stayed offshore, a steady shape with a steady light. It felt like a town. The beach people settled into groups that had formed at random and then made their own names. The dog people, the parents of toddlers, the quiet men who made ring around the ones who wanted to talk. Someone started a small, careful fire in a ring of stones with the Coast Guard's nod. People moved in toward it in a spiral that had the geometry of relief. We'd lowered 2 inflatable life rafts as windbreaks and turned them into windless shelters for anyone shivering. It was a silly use of expensive equipment, and it was perfect. When I close my eyes now, weeks later, the minute that returns isn't the foam or the anchor or the PA announcement. It's the weight of chalk in my palm and the way the numbers climbed with the steadiness of breath. It's the way the door made gravel sound like possibility. It's the way a stranger's kid said my name wrong, and I liked it better than my own. We never made it across the bay. We never made it to the timetable. We made it to where we didn't spread fire to an island or fear to a city. We made it to the place where a ship becomes land, and land becomes an answer to a problem you can't solve at sea. We made it to a beach that didn't ask our names before it held us up. The next day, a different crew took the ship. They swapped out the door pins and checked the rams for heat signatures with the thermal gun, found nothing worse than a tired O-ring. They hosed the chalk off the bulkhead and spread the paint a little to cover where my tally had bitten. They filled out forms with boxes for incident, response, secondary. They wrote numbers and some words. I went home, which meant a cot in a gym with a number like the ones I'd written on steel. I slept without dreams. When I woke, I stood for a long time with my hand resting on a wall because it felt like the door of the ferry. I thought of the tapping man and his partner and the nurse and the child and the parrot and the dog. I thought of Gina's pole and the mate's voice and the captain's decision. I thought of the gravel and how it held us without needing to know why. When people ask me what I did during the first week, I say this. I put a ship on a beach. I made a straight line where there wasn't one so people could walk it. I kept a door where it needed to be. I listened to a city exhale and I gave it the space to inhale again. And when the choice came down to beach or burn, to carry danger forward or set it gently on the earth and let the earth eat it, we chose the thing that didn't look brave on a movie poster and will feel brave in my bones for a long time. We never made it, and that was the point. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.